It starts as a simple question: what is art? But as you'll see today on 219 West, there are no simple answers. In fact, the question itself isn't even simple.
I always just viewed it as some kind of abstract black hole portal thing. I never knew exactly what it was.
Is it art? Or is it vandalism, when city walls, subway cars, and even doorways become an artist's canvas? What makes art public art? And there's no conversation about art without talking money.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Maffei. Today on 219 West, we'll look at how art in New York is bought and sold in one small gallery in Chelsea. We'll also look at how artworks end up in public spaces.
And I'm Mathilde Mel. First, art versus commerce. In Queens, a decrepit factory building that became a haven for street artists was recently painted over after a real estate dispute. The controversy opened up questions about whether graffiti is worth saving and what happens when private property becomes public art. Juliette de Keyser has the story.
This 200,000 square foot factory building in Long Island City, known as 5 Points, has been a mecca for the worldwide graffiti community since 2002. But on November 19, everything changed in one night when all the art was painted over.
There is nothing that can be saved. Look around you. It's painted, it's ruined, inside and outside. He just proved that he's the biggest vandal of all.
She's talking about the owner of the building, Jerry Wolkoff. That's him on the left. 11 years ago, he welcomed the graffiti artists. That's how 5 Points was created. Last year, he decided to destroy the building and build luxury housing. The artists mounted a legal challenge, but last month they lost. Reached by telephone, Wolkoff said he thought it would be best to paint over the graffiti all at once, instead of watching 3 months of agony with each one of these pieces of art going down. But until the last moment, the artists were confident and defiant.
Let me tell you something. Look around you. It's bigger than this. It's bigger than this because it's coming from Japan. It's coming from all over the place. Korea, England, Russia. Since I've been out here, I've seen people from all around the world. There's no reason why this place should be knocked down and add another condominium when you got one 3 blocks away.
The optimism was based on a 1990 federal law, the Visual Artists' Rights Act, which was meant to protect any art that has been incorporated in a building in such a way that removing the work will cause its destruction. The 5 Points art is now gone, of course, but the artist's lawyer, Jen Chains, is not giving up.
Now that the artwork's gone, what we're going to seek is damages for every piece of artwork that is destroyed. And those damages can be up to $150,000 per piece, and there are between 300 and 400 pieces. There were between 300 and 400 pieces on 5 Points.
Artists and fans are frustrated. 5 Points curator Jonathan Cohen has a message for the building owner.
I did not give you permission to destroy my walls, so I don't know what you're trying to prove, but your legacy is going to be a beautiful one from here on out. No one was going to remember you ever for anything you ever do with real estate, but for the biggest art murder in history.
Jerry Wolkoff says that's silly.
I allowed them to do this for 20 years. So why am I an art murderer? We're taking down the building, and that's the frustrations, and that's the things that I was concerned about. As I would be taking down the building, he might have done something irrational and got arrested. He might have, I don't know.
A few hours after the paint over, artists came to say goodbye to their beloved building. They drew and wrote notes on posters since they were not allowed to paint directly on the walls.
And we will be remembered not for the monuments we built, but for those we have destroyed, which I think applies fairly well to 5 Points.
It's amazing. So many other things are always labeled as a monument and kept up. And it just goes to show you the lack of respect of graffiti as an art form.
Some artists, like Carlos Game, say the demolition of 5 Points doesn't mean they will stop painting on walls. They are going to find new places to paint.
The geisha was mine in the front, the Oriental lady in the parking lot. I have like 12 pieces. 5 Points.
And how do you feel now it's white?
This is how I
Wolkoff said the demolition will take 3 months and could start in January. He told me when the new building is finished, he will invite the artists to come back. For 219 West, I'm Juliette Decazer.
Joining us now in the studio is Carlos Game, otherwise known as graffiti artist CTF. How's it going, Carlos?
How's it going? Thank you very much for having me here.
Great to have you. Yeah, graffiti artists call themselves writers, correct?
Not all graffiti artists are graffiti writers, and not all graffiti writers are artists. You know, there's a few elements in there. There are those who are, they go around the neighborhood or in the trains, on the subways, and they write their names. Those are more of the writers or the bombers. Then you have the artists. The graffiti artist will be the one who will do his name, his tag, in with colors in the background. That will be more. That's the next step after that. And then after that, when you leave that side and you go into murals and bigger things in there, I still consider myself a graffiti artist, and I was a graffiti writer. So now I'm in the mural side of the house.
And how has graffiti changed since you first started?
Back when I started, back in 83, 84, there was only maybe 3 or 4 different kinds of spray cans. You had like Rust-Oleums, Krylons, Red Devils, and they were very high pressure. You were limited with the colors that they had. Now there's companies that that cater to the graffiti artist himself. So I can get any color. It's like when you go to paint your house, Bear paint. You got Montanas, you got Montana Golds, you got blacks, you got Beltons, you got Aliens, you got a lot of spray paint out there. Good quality, dries fast, low pressure, medium pressure, high pressure. They make special caps now, where before we used to have to steal them off of the Kitchen Magics. Now they got fat caps, skinny caps. So there's actually a business for that right now.
How has the art itself changed? What people are tagging and what the designs and everything since the beginning.
A lot has still stood the same as far as the street. The graffiti writer is still out there. He's still doing a lot of tagging. They're still bombing out there heavily. It's not like how it used to be, where you can go into the train stations and go to the layups or the train yards and be reckless. You can't do that anymore, so that's changed. Now, because of terrorism and everything else, if you get caught in any of those places, they don't know the difference between you riding on a train or you planting a bomb. So things have changed. The penalties have changed. Now you don't get a fine. Now you go to jail. Back then they used to take me to my mother. I used to get a beating, and I'll do it again the next day. So things have changed in that sense there. Because of the graphics, because of the computer technologies that we have now also, you can plan your walls much better. Now you have your Photoshop, your Adobe, so you can play with everything. By the time you get to the wall, you pretty much did it in a 3D effect already.
Writing's considered vandalism in New York. It's illegal. It can even mean prison time if convicted. Given how detailed your work is and how much you put into it, how do you feel about it being illegal, like your work being something that's illegal?
Well, there's a difference between the illegal work and the legal work. I don't do illegal work anymore. I'm a little too fat to be trying to run away from the authorities right now. I think there is a weight requirement for that. When you look at it, it's I think that's what not the fun, but the adventure behind it is. Knowing that you can go in, you can do what you have to do and get out without anybody knowing you and leaving your mark behind. These guys that are out there doing that, and women also, by the way, they don't let anybody know who they are. Nobody would know who they are. They'll go years without ever being seen, or they could be in the same room with you and they will never acknowledge that they're there. Whereas when you have the guy who's doing street art, or the one who's doing more of the graffiti artist side of the house, the murals, they go out there and they want to be known. Now they're taking pictures. They're in the they're in the galleries. They're signing books. That's a different thing in there. So there's still there's still a very thin line between those two.
And how is graffiti similar to more like mainstream art, and how is it different?
I'll give you an example. If an artist can go ahead and take some feces from an elephant and go ahead and paint the Virgin Mary, and they'll call that art, and they'll hang it in the museum. You have to pay to go see this, but this is the Virgin Mary now, right? It's considered art, fine. But now I come across and I paint the same Virgin Mary, but I paint her in spray paint. Why am I called the vandal and not an artist? Why is my work worth less and theirs is worth more? So that question that you asked it's a fair question, but that's more that should be asked to society more than me, because it's very biased.
And what's the attitude among writers being represented in galleries?
A lot of them don't want to be represented in galleries. A lot of them are. Most of the writers that I know, they're not into it for the fame. Well, they're into it for the fame at some point. If you write your name everywhere, you're going to be known. But they're not in it for the exposure like that. They don't want to be known. They don't want to go signing a book or anything else. I think once you leave the limelight of the street and you go into the gallery scene, you sacrifice a lot there. Like, you really can't go back. Everybody knows who you are now.
Carlos, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
The street art of 5 Points may be the thing of the past, but there's still plenty of public art on view around the city. Angela Johnson tells us more.
Dotted across the city, public art is a form of community expression accessible to everyone. Well, almost everyone. Thousands of New Yorkers pass by this artwork every day, many not knowing what it is.
I always just viewed it as some kind of abstract black hole portal thing. I never knew exactly what it was.
This is the Metronome in Union Square. It was created by Kristen Jones and Andrew Gonzell. This digital clock, with a brick facade and a steaming void, explores time and the perpetual motion of the city. Could this be one of the city's most hated public artworks?
I think it's pretty. I think it's museum worthy, but to be honest, it's New York, so everything around here is museum worthy. It's art everywhere.
But many others disagreed. When it was installed in 1999, reviews flooded in, calling it pretentious and a grotesque modern nightmare. If you travel 40 blocks uptown, the hatred for public art turns into love, literally.
I can appreciate it, and who doesn't like love?
Robert Indiana's love sculpture began as a Christmas card design for the Museum of Modern Art in 1965. It's become one of the most recognizable and replicated artworks today. The 12-foot-high pop art icon is made from polychrome aluminum and is located on 6th Avenue and 55th Street. While Robert Indiana displays the message of love, Tony Rosenthal's Alamo is a bit more mysterious. Weighing just under a ton, the steel cube was installed in 1967 on the traffic intersection at Astor Place. It was supposed to be a temporary 6-month stay for the cube, but when it came time for removal, students who loved the cube protested, and the sculpture has remained at Astor Place since then. Admiration and acceptance of public art has not always had this result. In 1981, another large sculpture arrived in downtown Manhattan. Created by Richard Serra, Tilted Arc was a curving wall of raw steel, 120 feet long and 12 feet high.
Many people first became aware of Richard Serra in the 1980s. Commissioned by the government, he installed Tilted Arc in Lower Manhattan. The piece and Serra were attacked as aggressive and austere.
It had been commissioned by the government's Arts and Architecture program. But when it was erected, it carved the space at Federal Plaza in half. preventing the public from crossing the square easily. Once the objections and the petitions began against Tilted Arc, a public hearing soon followed. In March of 1989, a judge ruled to remove the work. And overnight, the huge steel construction was cut into pieces and removed.
The government had never destroyed a work of art that they had commissioned before then. They lied, they distorted the hearing, I was set up in a kangaroo court.
The next year, in response to Tilted Arc's removal, the government created VARA, the Visual Artists' Rights Act. This act gives artists moral rights to the attribution and integrity of their work. Not all works of art in the city are contested. Some sit quietly and become part of the fabric of the city, even welcoming children to play. The sculpture of Alice in Wonderland has been a family favorite in Central Park since it was constructed by José de Krefft in 1959. From steel monsters to bronze fairy tales, public art can't appeal to all people, nor should it be expected to. Whether you love it or hate it, public art is free to criticize or enjoy at your leisure. For 219 West, I'm Angela Johnson.
Here with us in the studio is Jesse Hammerman, Senior Project Manager of the Public Art Fund. Welcome to 219 West, Jesse.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, what is the Public Art Fund?
Well, the Public Art Fund is a nonprofit art organization founded in 1977 that commissions large-scale temporary artwork in the public in the 5 boroughs of New York City.
So why was it created and what does it do exactly? What is the mission?
Well, Public Art Fund was created in 1977 by Doris Friedman, who believed in the power of art to beautify the city and to incite conversation amongst people. And she wanted to bring art to the general public so people didn't have to go indoors to experience artwork. What do? We put on temporary, very important, sculptures, performances, videos, and we place them in the public throughout the 5 boroughs so that people can have access to contemporary fine art.
All right, so art is a very loaded word. What do you consider to be public art and how would you define it?
I mean, that is such a large question. What the Public Art Fund does is focuses on free exhibitions. So we do a lot of outdoor works. Some of the works are indoors, but the key word is free to the public. That's very important for us because basically we want to give people access to contemporary, interesting artists that are making such amazing things now and putting them in the public, in people's kind of paths is surprising. It allows someone to see something they had never seen before, see the artwork in a new way, and also see their surroundings in a new way in relationship to that artwork.
So still with this idea of art being a loaded word, what would you say to people that say that public art is unnecessary or, you know, a waste of money? What would you say to them?
I would say I disagree strongly because I believe in the power of art. I think the money that's used to create these artworks is generally private individuals and foundations donating money to the Public Art Fund that allows us to not only bring art to the public, but also to give artists the opportunity to make really large-scale work with the support of an organization that has experience in doing this. So it's twofold. It's bringing art to the public, and what does art do? It could do all different things, but what I see as being a great aspect of art is that you look at something and it gives you pause and you think about it, and then you think about the surrounding area different in relationship to that artwork.
And you were talking about art on walls, and you know our show is talking about 5 points and what just happened. Mm-hmm. So given what happened to 5 points, would you say that graffiti could fit into the realm of public art?
Sure, I think it's people expressing themselves. I think the difference between the Public Art Fund and the term graffiti, and 5 Points is a very special case, but graffiti, the history of graffiti is people without permission of the landowner or the property owner putting their mark on something. And as important as that is, the Public Art Fund works in conjunction with site owners and augments their ideals instead of does something against their ideals. Graffiti is super complicated because graffiti is an artwork, and I mean, it's very subjective, but it's also defacement of property. So I think it's complicated in that way, where 5 Points wasn't that necessarily. It was with the permission of the landowner. So it was graffiti, but it was a designated spot for graffiti. So I think it's graffiti historically in a different sense. And I think some was successful and some wasn't. And I think with all art.
5 Points was in an unfortunate location. How does the Public Art Fund decide where the work goes?
Well, it starts when we receive a proposal from an artist. And there's two ways that it works. We have some core sites at the Public Art Fund. We have the entrance to Central Park, which is named after Doris Friedman. We have City Hall Park, which we've been showing artworks in for 25 years. And then we also have an area in downtown Brooklyn called Metrotech Commons. And so we have our core sites, and we invite artists to show there, but we also accept proposals from artists that walk around the city, have an amazing idea, and then we look at the proposal and see if it's appropriate. And we go and ask the owner of the site for permission to actually mount the work there. So it works in multiple ways, and it can either start from the artwork or it starts from the site.
Okay, thank you, Jesse, for being with us today.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
We've been looking at renegade street art and large-scale public art, but most of us think about art as something bought or sold in a gallery. I caught up with one gallery owner who's working hard to make it in the city's high-powered art market.
When I first opened the gallery, it was a mess, I have to say, because I wasn't prepared. I felt like I was prepared and knew what I was doing. And I've been to all the galleries, all the big museums, not only in New York, but, all other big cities. And I felt like I had these great artists that, be great to be featured in our exhibitions. But it wasn't easy logistically.
It was Nanali's dream to one day open an art gallery. Born in Korea, she grew up in California. After studying fine arts in high school, she turned to fashion design in college and majoring in design management at Pratt Institute. In 2009, she finally opened a own space in Chelsea, simply named Blank Space.
When I'm carefully curating the shows or selecting the artists that we want to work with, I think that goes back to what Blank Space is about. So we will be completely blank and white for the artists to express who they are and what their works is about.
Since she started curating shows for her gallery, Lee has discovered and worked with several different artists. With exhibitions planned almost monthly, she has been able to learn all the details necessary to make her business grow slowly.
So when I was first curating the shows, I was only thinking about how to present these works and how to present these artists. But I wasn't necessarily thinking about the detailed strategy of how I'll be selling the artwork.
The current exhibition, called Disposition, is a two-person show of the work of Gregory Hayes and Anne Rusinoff. Lee said that the challenge is for these two different styles of painting to coexist in one space.
It's an abstract painting, so both of our artists has their own, styles of doing paintings, but the process is completely different. And I feel like the viewers will get that, how we curate the show will be really interesting dialogue between those two different artists' work.
Gregory Hayes is showing his work at Blank Space for the first time. After receiving an emails from Lee a month before the show, he said that the decision of working with the gallery was a pretty quick one to make.
For me, for showing them my work, they were excited almost immediately, so that made me, naturally feel good, and so our talking about a potential show came up fast.
Lee came over to Hayes' studio several times in order to get all the details ready for the opening of the show.
Then we will have the one circle here, and I have two margins here, and one primary or two, depending on the color and the size.
Oh, okay. Yep, that makes sense. It's nice to form a relationship with the gallery, and it's just like any other relationship. It starts off kind of slow, and you work your way up, and I think that's strong, because if you connect with the gallery, if you connect with the people that are in the gallery and they really believe in your work, and you believe in them to take care of where they're promoting it and who they're selling it to kind of build a really good foundation, that's important.
And to Lee, this good foundation is one major element that needs to be there to have a great show.
It's not only about how much you sell for the artist. I think it's a trust. It's also much more of a relationship than just working together, because I have to love their work, and they can tell, people can tell that if I love this or not, because I'm passionate. I love talking about the piece.
Randall Stoltzfus has been working with Lee and her team since 2010. Last spring, he was in his first solo show with the gallery. He said that knowing other artists working with Lee was enough for him at the time to start working with the gallery owner.
A lot has changed since 2009, right? That's another really important thing about what Nana was doing that was super significant for me. That was a time, not that many years ago, but everything was folding, right? It was a really rough time in the art market, and to find somebody at that moment who was starting out, who was optimistic, and it seemed very courageous, and it was a good sign.
Lee does not fear competition either from other physical galleries or from those developing online. She said that people still like to come see the artwork in person because it can be very different from one can see on a screen. The usual commission rate is 50-50 every time that Lee sells a painting. She sets the price of the artwork with the artist following a strict guideline.
In the higher part of the price range.
Okay.
Yeah. We will review what they have in mind or what they've already had for another exhibitions, and then depending on their career, depending on the show, we will decide on each price for each piece.
Lee is hoping that she will sell as many paintings as she can because money means survival.
There are many challenges every day. But I feel like the most challenging part is the rent rise in Chelsea. Everything's gotten so much more expensive. I have a lot of galleries, friends who left to Lower Side because it was just way too much to keep the space for the money that they're renting it for.
But Lee is optimistic about the future and already has long-term plans whether it happens in Chelsea or not.
5 to 10 years, I imagine our gallery to be on a ground floor space, bigger than what we have, for sure. And I'd love to work with more artists.
That's it for this month's edition of 219 West. I'm Mathilde Mel.
And I'm Jonathan Maffei. We'll be back next year with more stories from the 5 boroughs and beyond. Happy holidays from all of us here at 219 West.